one.
So what's up, guys? Paul Salmon here. All right, in our continuing saga of ideas that Robinson Helicopter Corporation ought to consider, we've got a couple more here, and the first of which involves the mast fairing. And if any of you guys have ever helped out around the shop anywhere they were working on a Robinson helicopter and had the distinct pleasure of getting to take the mast fairing loose on a Robinson R44, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's go out here to the shop and take a look, and I'll further elaborate on that. Okay, so we're out here in the hangar, and I thought I'd show you guys just exactly how many screws there are to take off that required to take out to take the mast fairing off. It's actually kind of surprising. So if you take a look up here, you've got several rows. You've got a row in the back right here of about 10 screws, and there's about another 10 or 12 on a row there, the center row there, and another top row up there. About 30 screws on this side. And if you go around to the other side, you've got, again, a comparable number of screws. On this side, you'd have about 20 to take out on this side, 20 or 25 screws. So somewhere in the neighborhood of about 50 to 55 screws to remove the mast fairing. It would be way easier for the poor old mechanic if we had the ability to just put a piano hinge here. I guess you could piano hinge the center of it in the front or whatever. But if you had a piano hinge and some quick connectors in the back here on the back side where you could just pull those loose and get in to inspect several things. There are several items that you need to be looked at under there. The vents for the gas tank are under there, the pitot tube, the little bulkheads that actually form that, those need to be looked at, and of course the servos, those need to be looked at 100-hour intervals as well. So it would be a lot easier if we had a quick way to getting into that thing. But right now, the poor mechanic, it takes him a long time to get in, take the mast fairing off. I got stuck out in Farmington, New Mexico one time with a gas vent or a fuel tank vent that was stuck shut, and all I had was one little screwdriver standing on two boxes and a short ladder that wasn't nearly long enough to try to get all the screws out of that thing to get to the little one-way check valve on the fuel vent to break it loose and get it working. And let me tell you, that took a long time. It took about an hour and a half to do all of that. So it'd be a lot quicker if we had a quick way to get into the mast fairing. One of the other options would be to put in a little door that you could run a bore scope in there and take a look. It'd be a lot easier though if you had just a piano hinge, was able to open it up and take a look at the inside real well. Okay, well, like I said, I got stuck once in Farmington, New Mexico, and boy, it took a long time to get in there and get to there's a little one-way check valve on each of the vents for the two tanks, and that thing was stuck shut. You couldn't blow through it at all. Ended up just beating on the thing. Finally broke it loose where it would work and reassembled it and got back in the air. But it took quite a while because of all those darn screws to get them in. Trying to get them lined up on there and all is just really a challenge. So it would be a lot easier with just a little bit of modification there. So. Okay, the next thing that Robinson might ought to consider, and I've always been kind of surprised at this, that they didn't have a listing in the POH for the fuel consumption rate or burn rate for the helicopter. You know, we've always taught everybody just figure 15 gallons an hour on an R44, and that typically works good, about 9 gallons an hour on an R22. And so far we've never had anybody run out of fuel yet, but it would be nice if they actually had it listed in the POH, some form of a chart for the burn rate, and listed at max manifold pressure at this altitude versus this altitude versus that one, something that gives you an idea that what the burn rate would be nice. If you've seen my other videos, you've probably seen the ones where I've mentioned about having fuel on board and whether to trust the gas gauge, fuel gauge, whatever you like to call it. Don't do it, and don't never trust the fuel gauge. So if you're flying a Robinson R44 and you're going to go out and fly for an hour, again, we use 15 gallons an hour as the burn rate. The aux tank holds 17 gallons. So if you gas, and so let's say you're wanting to go out and do some confined area approaches or steep approaches where you don't want to be all the way absolutely full of fuel, want to leave it a little bit light on fuel. Your aux tank holds 17 gallons. If you top it all the way up on the top off the aux tank and you see fuel at the top of the aux tank, you know you have 1 hour's worth of fuel in the aux tank. You've also got some over in the main tank because it's going to bleed across. If you're really paranoid, go over there and pump 3 or 4 more gallons in there. But you can leave it somewhat low on fuel or lower on fuel, and you know that you have at least 1 hour worth of fuel. If you wanted to go out with 2 hours worth of fuel, then top off the main tank. The main tank holds 29.5 gallons, which is essentially 2 hours worth of fuel. If you see gas at the top of that main tank, you know you've got 2 hours worth of fuel in the main tank, by itself. And you'll get some that'll cross feed over to the aux tank. And you can leave the aircraft relatively lighter and still know that for sure that you have 2 hours worth of fuel on board the aircraft. And if you need 3 hours, obviously top the thing off. Or if you're going by yourself anywhere cross country, take as much fuel as you can stand, below max gross weight. Fuel is your friend when you're flying cross country, because you may have to deviate due to weather or whatever, and having the maximum amount of fuel on there that you could get by with is a definite plus. So on your check ride, when you go to take your check ride, when they start talking about the operation of systems on your R44 that you're doing your check ride in, frequently they'll ask you a question. Okay, they'll pose a situation to you. They'll say, okay, you go out and you're going to do a flight, and you want to fly for, let's say you want to fly for 2 hours. You look at the gas or the fuel gauge on board the aircraft, and it shows that you have 3/8 of a tank on the aux, and you've got almost 3/4 of a tank on the main. How much fuel does the aircraft have in it? And the proper answer is you have no damned idea. All right, don't ever trust the fuel gauge. Never trust it. So if you're gonna fly and you want to put an hour's worth in, top off the aux. If you want 2 hours worth, top off the main, and that should work quite well. Well, I hope you guys found that at least partially helpful and informative. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And in the comment section, if you have some ideas about what Robinson ought to do to modify their helicopter, this is all in good fun, so be kind. But, mention it in the comments. I'd like to hear about it. And we will see you guys in the next video.